Hey there everybody, Travis Bowman here. I'm a fingerstyle guitar player and retro video game nerd. Let's do a video all about the XStation. So the XStation is an ODE. What does that mean? An optical drive emulator. These are really popular these days for older consoles. Basically all you need to know is that you take your old disk drive out of your console, you replace it with a device that's tailor-made to be used with that device. There's one out there for the Dreamcast, there's one out there for the Sega Saturn, a bunch of different consoles, but this one's specifically for the Sony PlayStation 1. You can't get an XStation for your Dreamcast or any other different console like that. So this comes from Rondo Products, and we can read on the back of the box here exactly what this thing is going to offer us and our PlayStation 1. We've got full compatibility with the entire PlayStation 1 library. We've got full redump, drag and drop support, multi-disc support, and easy swapping. You can return to the loader by holding the reset button for 1 second. We've got PS1 digital compatibility and IGR support through PS1 Digital's OSD menu. Micro SD cards of any size are fully supported. You can have those on exFAT or FAT32. It plays CD audio discs and supports ISO, CCD/image, or Q and bin files. You've got automatic 50 and 60 Hz switching, improved loading times over an original drive in good condition, easy firmware updates by simply dragging and dropping an update file to your micro SD card. No registration necessary for updates. You have the ability to revert to a previous firmware if you want. This thing is awesome, man. I really do love the XStation quite a bit just because once you get it installed, it's super easy, man. I love the way that they go about it. There are certain other companies that have some sort of awful sign up on your website, have an account, and have that be tethered to your device. None of that stuff with the XStation. You don't have to sign up for anything that you don't want to. You just purchase it, you get it installed, and it just works. And that's the brilliant thing about it, and that's why I love it so much. You get it, right? You take the CD drive out of your console, replace it with this, and voila, put in a micro SD card with the games that you want on it, and you can play any game of any region on your PlayStation 1 and have it all built into the console. You don't have to worry about switching discs anymore. So that can be a really good thing depending on what you're into yourself. Me, I can't get enough of this stuff, man. I'm an EverDrive guy through and through. I've got EverDrives for my Sega Genesis, my Super Nintendo. I've got a similar situation for my PC Engine. I've got something for my N64, you know, the Sega Dreamcast, the Sega Saturn. The list goes on and on. It's a wonderful thing, and I love it when modern technology comes back to aid the old technology, and this is such a brilliant way to do it because the number one thing that's going to fail on your consoles are your disk drives. And I'm letting the cat out of the bag in case you did not know this. You can't just go and buy a new disk drive for your console. Sure, you can find older ones on sale on eBay secondhand and all that good stuff, but ultimately all of these disk drives are going to be kaput. So let's talk user interface. You can see that on your screen right now for the XStation. It's pretty cut and dry, man. There's not a lot to it, and you know that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, you don't have a ton of extra features with this XStation. It's pretty cut and dry, but what I like it is the uniformity of the whole thing. Now, when you put those games on your SD card, you're going to want to get into your SD card and start doing folders. Now, folders for the letters of the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all that good stuff, all the way up to X, Y, and Z. The XStation prefers you to do it like this, and honestly, that's not a terrible thing. It's nice to have a really nice uniform layout that's really easy to access. And so all of the games that start with the letter T will be in the T folder. All the games that start with the letter A will be in the A folder, and so on and so forth. It's actually really nice and uniform. Everything's put together correctly, and it's really nice and organized. Like the box said, it can handle a lot of different formats, but the most common one that you're probably going to find is bin and Q. Now remember back in the day when we used to burn games on CDRs, that was a really common format to use, was bin and Q. I have not had any issues with compatibility whatsoever. Every single game that I've put on this SD card, and as you can see, I've put a ton of games on this SD card. Pretty much everything has worked without a hitch. You know, nothing spectacular has popped up that has been an issue as far as loading the games. All that is pretty darn straightforward. And also, just like the box says, I've played through this masterpiece on the XStation. This is Legend of Dragoon, one of the best RPGs ever made, and probably top 3 best RPGs on the system. It is a multi-disc game, a 4-disc game. You can save your game after you've completed disc 1, and then you can go back to the XStation menu and start disc 2, None of that is a problem, so that's great. The compatibility on this ODE is probably higher than most other ODEs that you would find out there. So this is another video about an ODE on my channel, which is not a strange thing. Like I said, I've done a video before on the Sega Dreamcast GDEMU, as well as the Terra Onion mode, which is also for the Dreamcast. And you can get the Terra Onion mode and use it with your PS1 as well, which is a really interesting thing. It's another subject altogether that we'll have to get to at some point later on. However, the most common comment that I get on my channel regarding this stuff, either EverDrives, flash cards, ODEs, what have you, there's always one guy that says something along the lines of, why don't you just get a Mister? If you don't know what a Mister is, basically it's a really fancy emulation box that uses FPGA technology that's really, really accurate, and it will emulate a console to a T. It's really awesome. I don't have one of those things. Why? Because I choose original hardware over that stuff. I would much rather have original hardware. And this is a great example sitting in front of you right here. This is the ASCIIware arcade stick for the PS1. Yes, you could get an adapter and use this and all that good stuff, but that's not really my thing, man. I would rather play on the original hardware because you know what? I used to have both of these consoles back in the day, you know? I grew up with this PS1 right here with the screen, and I also grew up with this version of the PlayStation 1 as well. You know, so it's nice to still have that hardware option, and if it's there, I'm going to use it. Not only do these consoles work fine still to this day, but you can have this wonderful, beautiful RGB SCART video quality out, and if you pair that with an upscaler, it's orgasmic, my friend. It looks great. So I've saved the worst part for last. I mean, I've praised this thing up and down. It's a no-brainer, right? This is an amazing upgrade to your Sony PS1. So what are the negatives? Unfortunately, installation is a nightmare unless you know exactly what you are doing. And look at this guy right here. I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to soldering. I've tried, I've done simple things like replacing capacitors in a Super Nintendo. That's a super easy job, man. But this, anywhere that you look online where this is for sale, they will tell you, hey, a novice simply cannot do this. This is one of the most terrifying mods to do for somebody like me who is not experienced in that at all. And it's just such a freaking bummer when you try to install something like that and you screw it up. Nothing is worse. There's no worse feeling than knowing that you've destroyed your console that you've tried to repair or fix up, you know what I mean? You can pay to have somebody do this for you, whether it's a local guy. There's several places online where you can ship your console to this person and they will install it for you and send it right back. You know, there's all sorts of ways that you can get this thing installed without having to do it yourself. I lucked out and had a good buddy of mine named Cody. If you've been watching my channel for a long time, you know who he is. He's saved me more times than I'd like to admit. I have made so many mistakes doing these console mods myself, and I end up giving him a call and I say, hey man, do you think you can, you know, help me? And he is so patient and so nice, and I'm really lucky to call him a friend and that he's been there for me in times of trouble, because I have messed up these consoles more than I would like to admit, for sure. So to let you know just how complicated it is, it's not just taking this chipset and putting it in your console, soldering 3 or 4 wires and calling it done. Unfortunately, it's a lot more complicated than that. You have to lift a pin off of the freaking motherboard, man. So you've got these chips that have all these itty bitty little legs going around this square shaped chip. And you have to pinpoint one of those legs, heat it up, and lift it off of the actual motherboard while still keeping it attached to the chip itself. It's really, really complicated, and it just drives me crazy even thinking about attempting to do this myself. So thank you, Cody. You're the man. I really appreciate you. So once you get it installed, for the most part, you're going to be good, but I will warn you about one other thing that you should probably do if you're going to go so far as to either install this yourself or hire somebody professional to do it for you, and that is replacing the capacitors on the power supply of your PS1. This is where I ran into a lot of trouble. I like to use wireless controllers with my systems just because it makes things so much easier, not having to deal with all these different cords and stuff. You know, I do YouTube a lot, and I am playing a bunch of different consoles and capturing footage on different consoles on a daily basis, and it's just a nightmare to deal with cables. So what happened was, I had the XStation installed, it was perfectly fine, and I was talking on the phone with a buddy of mine while I was capturing footage for a game, and I wanted to tell him about this super cool Namco controller that I got that's supposed to work really well with Ridge Racer. And so I unplugged the dongle, the wireless dongle, to this wireless controller, and all of a sudden my PlayStation started acting up. And, you know, I shouldn't have done that. I should have been smart enough to know not to unplug things like that while the console is powered on, but like I said, I was on the phone, I wasn't paying attention. It was a stupid mistake. It was a big, stupid mistake. But my XStation would not work shortly after that, and I thought I fried the thing, which is a very real possibility that it could have happened. So I reached out to the guys at Stone Age Gamer. We had a chat about it. We tried to figure out what's going wrong, and they offered to, have me send it back to them with the console and everything so they could do some testing. So I reached out to Cody first, because rather than ship my console out, I would rather have it done locally if at all possible. And like I said, thank you, Cody, you're the man. He looked at it, and it turns out that I just needed new capacitors on that power board. So there's something strange about the original PS1, meaning that those capacitors pretty much heat up all the time, even if your console's not on, which is really, really strange. I don't know what it is about the PS1. I'm not an engineer. I don't know much about this at all. I just know that if you have your PlayStation plugged in, and if you reach under it with your hand, you'll feel some heat, even though you haven't turned the console on for a minute. So the PS1 is probably one of the few retro consoles that you might consider actually unplugging from the power supply, unless you actually plan on playing it just for that reason. But nevertheless, if you're going to be using your PS1, especially with the XStation, you should probably go ahead and replace those capacitors on your power supply in that console. That's a no-brainer. That should be something that you definitely do if you are going to get this XStation installed. And if you're feeling brave like I was, it's really not that scary of a job. It's just capacitors. Capacitors are pretty easy to change out if you know what you're doing and if you take your time. That being said, I did it myself, and I screwed it up somehow. I think I managed to put a capacitor in there backwards, and I couldn't get it to work. And either I did a shoddy job or what, but Cody fixed it for me. He put the capacitors in there the right way, and everything's all golden after that. So how much does this thing cost? The XStation by itself is an ODE that will cost you about 120 bucks plus shipping, and you need to supply your own micro SD card. So it's really not that bad, but it's still over $100 for a device like this, which some people may frown upon when they could just emulate it on their computer. But to me, man, it's all about the hardware for me, whether it's the original hardware or cool stuff like this, the arcade stick, or that Namco controller, or the fishing rod controller, all that weird peripheral stuff I can't get enough of, man. That's where my passions lie. I like to use the original hardware because it reminds me of the time that I used to live in when these consoles were relevant. And by adding that ODE into this console, I'm keeping that console and those memories alive. And it's just the way I like to be. Now, one other thing to keep in mind is that this XStation is only for certain models of the PlayStation 1. And I'll put a link in the description to where you can look all that stuff up yourself. I don't want to try to name out every single one of them right here when you can just look at that website. But my point being is that the PS1, the PSONE, this guy right here, is not eligible for the XStation. They're two completely different pieces of hardware despite being the same console. So, sorry PS1. No XStation for you. However, someone is working on a similar alternative for the PS1, and I'll put that in the link in the description as well so you can check that out. I'm kind of excited about that. I think I might want to install that in this console as well once it becomes available, if it becomes available. By the time you're watching this video much later on, it might already be out. Once you get it installed, it's incredibly easy, user-friendly, and all that good stuff, but getting it installed is where the difficulties lie, unfortunately. So that being said, if you are interested in this console and you're interested in getting the XStation in your PS1, but the thought of doing it yourself just scares you to death, you can still find these XStation PS1s on eBay right now, and they're really not that expensive. I'm looking at one right now, and it's on eBay for $191. That's really not bad. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think about the XStation for the PlayStation 1. Would you consider getting this for your PS1? Do you already have it? Or is the thought of the whole thing just too much for you to handle and you'd rather just say screw it and go emulate? Let me know the answers to all those questions in the comments below. Thank you so much for subscribing to my channel. I really appreciate that. And I'll catch you guys at the next video. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.